Hello, Central New York, and hello, hockey fans all across the internet. And welcome to the Central New York Hockey Report. I'm your host, Scott Kinville. And guys, it's here. Hockey season is officially in full swing throughout the entire hockey world, and we're just glad to be a part of it. For today's show, we are going to do our preview of the Utica Pioneers men's and women's hockey teams. Before we get into that, I do want to bring in our hosts, our co-hosts, and our guests. Sitting next to me, of course, my buddy, the guy with the keyboard over there, getting all impatient, wants to touch the buttons. Dave the Save Warner.
I don't want to touch the buttons. I do it just to thrill you.
Yeah, well, I saw your fingers were shaking. I'm like, he's got something in store. I don't know.
No.
You know, so. And anyway, speaking of the Utica Pioneers, coming to us from what looks like a dorm room at the Utica University, Mr. Jordan Brockway. Jordy, what's going on?
It's going good, and hope this time there won't be any noise interruptions. So
yeah, well, you know what? Just added flavor to the show.
Yeah, it's true.
Didn't sound like he had a washing machine going on in the background there, but
yeah, right.
Yeah.
Well, last time he was on, it was like a dorm party going on. It was awesome.
Really.
Oh man! And to help us sort this all out, this guy knows more about Division III hockey than just about anybody that I know of on this planet. He is a writer for the USCHO. He is the mastermind behind the D3 hockey news. He is the one, the only Mr. Chris Sugar. Chris, what's going on?
I appreciate the intro there. It was well crafted. No, I'm doing well. Just coming off some exams, but no, I appreciate the boxing style intro.
Well, you know, I was trying to do my best Michael Buffer voice, you know.
Right.
But the older I get, I just can't roll the R's anymore. So that's
I'm young and I can't, so.
Yeah, right. So anyways, guys, let's get right to this. We're going to talk about those Utica Pioneers, and I think we're going to start with the men's team. So just to recap real quick, last season, the Utica Pioneers men's team finished with an overall record of 25-3-1. They were a perfect 20-0-0 in the UCHC. Final ranking of 5 in the last national polls. But this season, they come in ranked 6th. And we've got a lot of roster upheaval we're going to have to talk about. And they got a big test right off the hop with number 2 Adrian coming to town. So first of all, guys, let's go over the key losses and the key additions. You know, last year's team was a very veteran heavy team that was definitely built to make a big run into the finals. Unfortunately, it didn't happen. The University of New England tripped them up there. But gone from the roster are Dante Zapata, Justin Allen, Connor Fedoric, Lucas Herman, Jason Dobé, Mick Curran, Joey Burkopek, Remy Parker, Regan Kavanaugh, Brandon Osmondson, Buster Larson, Jackson Rukowski, and John Monkovic. Big losses, Chris.
Indeed. I mean, I think if anything, it's one of those, it sounds bad to say, or it sounds like you're kind of being that typical, I don't want to say just, pessimistic guy or just kind of like a hater if you want to say it. But, every year they're hyped up as this, like, the best thing in D3, just on, like, say, paper, just in, terms of media. And they just haven't been able to get done the NCAAs. So I think, if anything, with this year, it's kind of a fresh start. You're not really being expected, I guess, for people that really follow the sport, they're not expected to do or perform at the level they usually do just because they have so many new guys. But I guess in terms of the usual, fans or people, you either love Utica or you hate them. There's nobody that really just says, yeah, they're all right, whatever. It's usually you have one or the other about them. So
what do you say? The New York Yankees of D3 hockey? Is that what it is?
I'd refer it almost like, I mean, I'm a Cowboys fan. I kind of relate it to that.
There you go.
There we go.
I like Dallas, but I mean, it's true. I mean, people, they're hyped up. It's like every single year. Then this happens, and then it's like. So I just think with a fresh start, it can kind of help them out, and possibly, maybe you just get some younger guys in there that don't really know the past or know what's been going on, like their UNE issues. Maybe that solves it, but they haven't been able to win the NCAA game. So at the end of the day, it's you're concerned about what they're going to do this season, but they really have nowhere to go but up because the UCHC still shouldn't be a problem for them.
No, and we're going to look at that in a little bit. But you're right. I mean, this is going to be a completely new roster just about because they've only got 10 players returning. from last season's team. Jordy, I know you've got to take a look at them Friday night at the Adirondack Bank Center. And I actually put an article out today on CNYHockeyReport.com about all of the new players coming in. They got 15 first-year players and 2 transfers coming in. Was there anything that stood out to you when you got the first look at them on Friday night?
Well, first thing that stuck out was looking through the preview and the thing you'll pick up when you come in there. This is the largest roster turnover since 2010, 2011. So going in, I just said, screw it. We're probably going to lose. And my first question was who's going to be in net. You saw Ethan Roberts for 2 periods, and then you saw Landsberger for 1. The first 2 goals, if I were Ethan, I'd want back because he got beat on it was a backhander low on his blocker side, and then they started attacking his blocker side, and they got him early. But once he figured it out, he shored up. The second period was great hockey, and the beginning of the third, the only reason I feel like they got burned so bad with goals is because Lansey came in, and Lansey was cold. If it wasn't for that, I don't think they lose by as much. But, I mean, some guys didn't stick out because I wasn't necessarily looking for their game. Some of them did, like Spagnuolo coming over from Adrian. He looks really good. Herrera coming in from the Junior Comets. I was seeing him a lot in where I was looking. Obviously, Ethan Roberts in goal looked really good. And it was mostly just a matter of the whole team itself. Didn't look too bad. I expected a lot worse and got a lot better.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, of course, that first period was a little rough, but I mean, in all fairness to the Pioneers, that was their first game that they were playing together with pretty much an entirely brand new roster. And the USA U18s had been playing since mid-September, and you're talking about a team that's loaded with, future NHL draft picks. I mean, Cole Eiserman's projected to go top 5 in this upcoming draft. So I really don't put a lot of stock in preseason because, coaches are throwing different players, different lines together. They want to see what works. They're not really more or less concerned about the W. The one thing that really stood out to me with this incoming crew or crop of players that's coming in, guys, these guys are huge. They're huge. I wrote that article this morning, and I think that maybe there was 2 players that are under 6 foot, a few players that are maybe under 180. Coach Heenan and Coach Therrien are definitely building a big, strong team that, maybe they're at least for this season, going to go away from the run and gun a little bit and maybe go more towards the physical end. What do you think, Chris?
I mean, possibly. I think the skill is always going to be there. I mean, they're always going to have, I think, one of those where it kind of going back to like their ranking or why, they're still viewed highly is because they're always going to have a good roster. Utica's not going to, the recruiting's never going to go down. If anything, it's going to keep going up, especially with all the, the D1 rumors, whatever you want to call it. They're not going to get worse in terms of skill. And I just think, if he thinks he needs a bigger team or can play more physically, then maybe they're getting bullied in some ways. I mean, I don't watch Utica as much as you guys do, obviously. I mean, I see a decent amount of them, but if that's a change of style, it can't hurt. I mean, that's kind of how a lot of West teams play. It's more of a physical style, play the body. I mean, Hobart seems to do that a lot in Plattsburgh in terms of teams that I would recognize from the East that kind of stand out in terms of that style of play. But I mean, Utica, if they're going to do it, they're the type of team they're the type of program, I should say, that is able to do it because they can, in a way, kind of pick and choose who they would want to get. And if that's the guy they want to get, there's a good chance they can land him over if another program wanted to do it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I don't mean that as they're going to go to a completely, grind them down team, but I think maybe perhaps when you look past, once you get past the UCHC and you get into the NCAAs, that's more of the game, right? You got to be, it's more of a physical game. We've seen that in the past few years. And I kind of just tend to think that obviously size wins in that situation. And that's exactly what they were looking for. But you're right, Chris, the recruits here, I'm looking at some of the numbers that some of these guys have had. So Aiden Hughes, he's coming in. He had 76 points in 53 games played last year. Andrew Della Rovere, he was 83 points in 53 games. They're bringing in scorers, guys. There's no doubt about it. There's players coming in that can put the puck in the net. But this is just going to be a completely different roster. And, looking at the schedule, they're not going to have much time to gel because, as we all know, number 2 Adrian is coming to town. That first game is tomorrow night, Friday night at 7 p.m. and then Saturday again at 2 p.m. Chris, you cover Adrian quite a bit. What can you tell us about them?
Yeah, I've been, in a way, I guess some people have said I have favoritism toward him, but I really don't. I mean, obviously I like Coach Krug, but it turns out they're where I end up being. I mean, the Final Four, I'm not just going to not go because Adrian's there, so
Sure.
they're there. I mean, and who doesn't want to go to a Utica Adrian game in Utica? I mean, it's one of those where, you'd be stupid not to if you can. So, I think with Adrian, they're losing a lot too. I mean, they've lost, arguably, you could have said they lost some of the, the top guys in D3 in general, and then older guys in their team. They're bringing a lot in, and goaltending last season was kind of nobody really knew. It would seem secure at times, then other times it would just seem, what's going on. Hence that UNE game, but I'm going to kind of count that as an outlier because the other goalies couldn't do anything either. So right. We'll just move past that. But it just kind of seemed as though I think goaltending that's what I'd be looking for with Adrian to see how that goes for him. Just because, again, Utica's very – I mean, you can look at Adrian and say they're as good. Utica's got guys too, obviously. So it's if the goalie's not on, Utica can make it, a blowout as well. It just depends who does well. And I mean, again, Adrian, it's not like they're returning the whole team. I mean, they're losing a lot.
Yeah, absolutely. And Jordy, you mentioned Dante Spagnuolo earlier. When I was doing that write-up, I didn't realize he played 3 years of D1 already at Mercyhurst. And then he went over to Adrian, and now he's coming to Utica for his graduate year. So definitely some experience coming in as well.
Yeah, and we know Gary likes his schedules as stacked as he possibly can get them, like with St. John's coming in later this year for the Thanksgiving showcase. So I had a feeling Adrian was coming back. I just didn't know how early.
Well,
so hopefully it's not thankfully it's not UNE where I'm getting nightmares of the goalie. So hopefully it's exciting this weekend.
Yeah, I think it will be. I think there's no doubt about it. I just, it is what it is. Like I said, you're going to be seeing a Utica team that's really just starting to play together for the first time. So it's going to be really interesting. But you mentioned the schedule, so let's take a look ahead at that a little bit. Right after the Adrian series, they're at home for 2 games against Stevenson. November 3rd and 4th, Stevenson actually got some votes in the latest USCHO poll. So they're not a pushover either. So those first 4 games, there's your test right there for your new roster. So
I have notes everywhere, and I'm trying to figure out which one's which.
That's
I was going to say I could fill in some time if you need it, but
yeah, go right ahead. If you got it,
I can too.
No, I was just gonna.
He was dying.
I knew he had something ready.
What do you mean you saw me? I'm not on camera.
No, I just know you have it. I know you have something.
I always have something.
Yep.
Well, I just think it's almost like it's the reverse of last year. I mean, they went to Adrian twice and then Stevenson twice back to back with the travel schedule. So I mean, if you were gonna pick a world, I think you'd prefer this one where at least you get them all at home and you don't have to go cross country on short weeks and whatnot. And I also think, I mean, you got to schedule when you can. I mean, the UCHC, the current UCHC, as I should call it, as big as it is, I mean, it doesn't leave much room for you to be able to schedule unless you're going to play a Wednesday night game, which just isn't going to happen with Adrian because you want him for 2 or Stevenson just because of geography. So with them, you almost kind of have to front load it just because of the way it's going to go. And I mean, and like I said, St. John's, I love them coming in. I think that's a great. I like when there's the crossovers. Now, St. John's is one of those teams. I think they're underrated. I mean, I said in my preseason thing, I think St. John's could win that league. They're always just kind of that. They're the team that nobody really thinks of, I think, and they can just sometimes pull it off. But I like the St. John's team coming in for the tournament.
Sort of reminds me of Trine coming in.
Mm-hmm.
The team that nobody ever really heard of, and then they come to the tournament. It's like, wow, these guys are actually pretty good. So
yeah, they're over. A lot of the West teams tend to be overlooked, especially I don't want to call them mid tier because I don't, you kind of put them into pockets here, but I just think a lot of those like the teams that aren't consistently in the Final Fours or in their conference championships, I just think a lot of the West teams are overlooked, and it's partially why I'm occasionally told I have a West bias, even though I've been told I have an East bias and everything else. But whatever.
You just have biases everywhere. You collect them.
Yeah, which typically averages out to neutral. You do the math. But I think that the West, a lot of people overlook them just because they don't like. Why would you want to watch if you're in Maine? Why would you watch a Marion hockey game? You wouldn't realize that they're pretty good and that they beat Adrian and St. Norbert. You wouldn't know that, but they did. I just think it's one of those like just kind of geography pocket things.
Yeah, absolutely. And speaking of that Thanksgiving showcase, there's another pretty good team coming to town for that, and that's the number 11 Oswego State Lakers. No guarantee that the Pioneers and the Lakers will play in the showcase. However, they will be playing December 9th up in your neck of the woods, up there at Oswego, and it's going to be a rematch of last year's game, excuse me, which was actually happened to be the Pioneers Teddy Bear Toss game. But I got a feeling that that's going to be a really good game because obviously the Lakers are going to be looking for some payback, and especially if they end up playing twice this season, that could be a real treat for Central New York hockey fans.
Oh, 100%. I mean, with Oswego, it's the time of the year. They got it at a good time where because they're not playing them sort of when all the students are gone, and a lot of the townspeople just aren't. So you should have a good crowd. I mean, I believe it's during finals week, so most of the people going to that game, they're going to go whether it's finals week or not. So, I think it's one of those where it'll be a good atmosphere. I mean, it kind of, just to be kind of blunt, it kind of sucks when Adrian comes to town for their tournament and there's like 500 people there or 600 just because there's no students, no town. It's just during the holidays, you get bad weather, the students are all gone. So you'd prefer to see that place with a full crowd for them. And so with Utica, it should be fun and being able to see them with a full, pretty much a full place instead of having it be kind of empty. But the Swiggers play well. I mean, their worst games are usually against their quote unquote worst opponents versus they usually seem to get up for the good opponents. So we'll see what happens.
Did they lose a lot off their roster from last year?
They lost some. I mean, for the most part, they got a couple transfers. I believe a few D1s. I haven't really focused too much in on them, but for the most part, it's a pretty veteran team. I mean, it's nowhere near the turnover of like a Utica, and I don't think even like of Adrian. On paper, yeah, exactly. So they should be good. I mean, if you look on paper every year, and I've talked to various coaches who have said this, they have a top 3 roster every single year on paper. Top 2 or 3, if you just look down the roster, but they just don't perform to that level. But on paper, you look at it and you're like, how is this team not going to be, top 5?
Yeah, I mean, I know that they got Cal Shell coming back, the goaltender there who actually played very well in that game last year at Utica. I felt actually kind of bad for him in that game because, I mean, the Pioneers ended up getting the shutout. I think it was like a 4 or 5-0 final, but it just didn't reflect how well it was for you, right? It just didn't reflect how well he played because the poor guy got shelled the entire game. But no, like I said, yeah, right there. Hey, that's pretty good.
Oh, God. There we go.
And you know what? Dave's asleep at the wheel. Didn't have his finger on the button.
I was leaning back. I was leaning back listening.
Just about to fall asleep. Anyways.
I am tired.
Speaking of that Teddy Bear Toss game, actually, there's a D1 opponent coming to town for that one in Stonehill. So that's going to be another really good test. I mean, there's going to be a lot of early season hockey that the Pioneers are going to have some really good opponents coming in.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's an interesting kind of with the D1s. You don't usually see D1s or D2s for that matter because you're not going to get credit for the game on pairwise. Which Utica, they're in the situation where they don't really have to rely on that being, at the moment, they're the favorites of the UCHC. Obviously, who knows what's going to happen. But, as if we look at past history, you could kind of assume they're probably, at least Heenan, let's just say Coach Heenan assumes they're going to win the conference. So they don't really have to worry about the 25 games where you would need that extra credit for a win. So they can afford to play a Stonehill. I mean, it's kind of like, if you had to ask me, it's sort of like, hey, this is what we're presenting to Division I in terms of like an atmosphere so it's, to me, that's kind of what it could seem like, but no, it should be a good game. Those games are almost kind of weird though, because like in the USCHO poll, they matter but in the grand scheme of things, they don't matter.
Right.
So it's just kind of it's a weird, dynamic at times.
Yeah, because that Utica to D1 rumor will never go to rest until they actually do go to D1. It's almost like a pastime around here now.
Yep,
Pretty
every
much.
year. Anytime anybody on campus figures out that I pretty much cover these guys, they go, "What's it about D1?" I go, "I have no clue," just like everybody else.
I know, right? The closely guarded secret that it is. One last series I really wanted to talk to you guys about was they got Nazareth coming up. Let me see here. It's a home and home, January 26th and 27th. Nazareth is actually on the rise. They got 2 first place votes in the UCHC preseason poll. They're ranked number 2 in that poll behind Utica, of course. But you know what? That could be definitely a series that they're looking at to make a name for themselves.
Is that series in Utica or Naz?
It's a home and home.
Okay, home and home.
Yep,
Okay.
they're playing one in Utica and one in Naz.
Okay. I mean, it's fair. I think, do I see them splitting? I don't. I think Nazareth will do very well in the conference. I just don't know if they're going to beat Utica. I mean, I could see them easily being second.
Sure.
I just don't. I just have no reason to believe that Utica won't be first until proven otherwise. I mean, again, this weekend, I don't think it'll even show much, just because if they go out there and they get blanked 8-0 and 5-2, it's like, what is it? Not saying it's going to happen, but what's that going to mean in terms of the conference? You're not playing Adrian every weekend. So,
right.
So I think it's one of those where, you'll see who the team is. That's against Stevenson. That Stevenson weekend, I think, is your most important weekend versus the Adrian.
Yeah, absolutely, because that's right there in your conference, and it's your wheelhouse. So I tell you what, guys, why don't we close this segment with the UCHC actually put out a thing on X, Twitter, whatever you want to call it. Their players.
Stop saying the word Twitter.
Well, I'm just trying so that we don't.
No, that's X.
Okay.
Everybody
Those
knows
links
that
look
by now.
weird when they come in your inbox.
Yeah, right. You're right, actually.
Mark's the spot.
Whoa, did I get hacked? Anyways, they put out a players to watch. And for Utica, they chose defenseman Kimball Johnson and forwards Jacob Rowe and Christian Acosta. Now, we had talked about all the losses on the roster earlier. I didn't mention that they lost their leading goal scorer in Remy Parker, who had 23, their assist leader in Jason Dobé, who had 32, and Dobé and Mick Curran tied for the points lead in 37. So tell us, Jordy, a little bit about those three, and is there anybody else that we should watch for?
So, yeah, Kimball, I mean, he kind of got the rest last game, but Kimball, Briol, and Acosta, they all come back. They're all good at their own thing. Christian will probably be your scorer, a little bit of an agitator. Kimball will play your normal D role, except he steps up to the first pair this season. And then Briol's probably going to play some sort of opposite side to Christian. And all three of them, obviously, since they're the most senior guys, and Briol and Johnson were both D1, they're the ones to watch. But besides those guys, I mean, if they play a 1A, 1B, which is anything is possible with Gary, between Lanzi and Roberts, both of them, obviously, you want to watch. Herrera impressed me last week. Carroll's coming along as an agitator. Got with the number change, seems to be playing a little bit different, a little bit more up to what I expected. And there's one more. And I want to say I don't know if I want to give it to him or not, but I'll just give it to Lundberg, because he's very small. He's like, there's probably 3 or 4 forwards that are that like Mick Curran, Remy Parker size, that 5'9", 5'10".
Right.
He was one of those guys that I didn't hear his name at all, but I saw him everywhere.
Right.
Everywhere.
Right. Yeah, one of those guys, like a water bug, just everywhere.
Yep.
Water bug.
Yeah, I'm going to be actually, you mentioned Ethan Roberts. I'm going to be really interested to see how that goaltending situation works out, because Landsberger pretty much had the net to himself last year. Roberts coming over from D1 is going to push for playing time. So that, and I think that's only going to help, because if they're both pushing each other, then that competition usually works out for the best, where, everybody's trying to put their anyways. But I'm just saying, when you feel like you got that person in your rearview mirror that wants your spot, it's usually a pretty good motivator. So yeah, that Utica Pioneers goaltending situation is going to be pretty awesome too. Chris, any closing thoughts on the Pioneers men team?
I mean, I think it should be a fun year for them. I mean, again, it's one of those where, if they do have some growing pains, which they probably will, but if they do, it's like the people who watch it closely or fans are gonna like expect it to happen. Like, I don't think people are gonna be. I mean, are you two gonna be shocked if they split with Adrian or possibly go 0-2 and then go sweep Stevenson? Like, would that? I mean,
right.
Versus like the general fans maybe like, oh, this same old thing. They just, they're just not going to be good. It's versus you guys know, it's like just growing pains. And so I think they'll still take the UCHC. I mean, that conference is it does seem as though as the conference is kind of getting better and better now, it's just breaking off. So it's just not going to matter. But I think this year's probably going to be one of their best years in terms of overall teams. Like Wilkes, I think should be very good compared to last year. Stevenson, and Nazareth. So we'll see what happens with them, but I think Utica, it's one of those where I think being under the radar could benefit them, especially come like tournament time. I think it could possibly be a reason why they get over that hump and win a playoff game.
Right, absolutely. And you mentioned going 0-2 against Adrian. They did that last year, and it wasn't Chicken Little, the sky is falling, because they did end up with the number 1 ranking towards the end of the year. So you lose those first 2 games, the season is far from over. So it's not really that much to worry about. All right, guys, I'll tell you what, why don't we take a break here? And when we come back, we're going to talk about the Utica Pioneers women's team. We'll be right back.
Visit My Little Falls and stay connected with the latest news, information, and events in the city and the area. Our mission is to generate interest in the community and connect residents in a more meaningful way by facilitating deeper conversations about how these stories will shape the future of the Mohawk Valley. Join thousands of weekly visitors who stay up to date with feature stories, interviews, videos, our event calendar, and print publication, the Mohawk Valley Express. It's about timely local news for the community, keeping citizens informed about important issues, telling about the people who live and work here, and giving locally owned businesses the opportunity to reach a very targeted audience of locals and tourists alike. It's a whole new form of media-rich content developed specifically for today's mobile lifestyle and listeners. You can download our iOS app in the iTunes Store, listen to our podcast, or sign up for our weekly email newsletter. Stop by today. You'll be glad you did.
And we're back after listening to Dave the Save's awesome Rocky-type pump-up music. And it's all energized for segment 2 here.
I do that just for you.
Yeah, well, hey, listen, I always appreciate it, pal.
Yep.
All right. Segment 2, we're going to talk about the Utica Pioneers women's hockey team. This season, they entered the season actually ranked 13th. Last year, they went 22-3-3. They were 17-1-2 in the UCHC. And I'll tell you what, looking at this team this year, they remind me of the men's team last year, where they return a lot of their core, and it's got a feeling like this is the year, right? Because the biggest loss, and it is a big loss, losing Georgiana Santulo. I mean, she is the second leading scorer in program history. But, I went through the stats, and they're returning so many other players in that core that really made that team great last year. Like, for instance, Erica Sloan's coming back. She had 24 goals last year. She led the team. She also led the team in points with 45. Santulo did lead in assists with 26, but right behind her was Carly Stefanini with 25, and that line was dynamite, right? But like I said, really the biggest loss being Santulo. A lot of returners, though. So, Chris, overall, what's your thoughts on the Utica Pioneers women's team?
I think initially I would have some – I don't usually put much value in exhibitions. I mean, I don't. I mean, I think I would take a look and put some value in that Canton game when they draw. I believe it was 3-2. Canton came in and won. I would put some value in it just because it's one of those where, don't get me wrong, Canton's actually up and coming. They should be a pretty competitive team. I mean, they're not a bad team by any means, but it's one of those where it's those games that I would have liked to have seen them win, or given Norwich a little bit better of a run. Because just like it's an exhibition for Utica, it's an exhibition for Utica.
Right.
I mean, so whether you're playing everybody, that just means Utica should have more familiar faces on the ice. And I mean, and again, it's an exhibition, not going to put much weight into it, but I would have liked to have seen them stay a little closer with Norwich instead of a 6-1.
Yeah.
And then at least tie or beat Canton. Again, under the circumstances of you have this much back, this is kind of the year allegedly that has the feeling of, this could be it. So those are my two, I guess, initial like early thoughts. But I mean, I have some this weekend. You'll find out a lot. I'm like, it's a little different. Yeah, it's a little different than the men's situation because they really haven't played. I mean, the USA team is better than probably any team they're going to play this season. Actually, not probably, they are. So it's kind of, you're just thrown into a test without studying versus, the woman, they've played 2 games, they've got something under. So this is a more realistic, competition. And also with Suffolk. Suffolk's a very good team. They have a new coach this year after Taylor Wasik, I think that's how you say her name.
Right.
Might have messed it up, but whatever the case is, she took the Linden 1D1 job. They're a good test because again, they're not that renowned, powerhouse, but they made the NCAA tournament and they could very well do it again. So that's a good test. And then you're going to get either Elmira or Adrian, which, self-explanatory. That's going to be, your kickoff to start the year. So I think this weekend is kind of a better judgment than the men's first weekend, just because the women have kind of had a more traditional start in terms of like exhibitions and just you're easing in slightly more than getting Adrian right off the bat.
Right. And you're right. I did fail to mention that they did lose their 2 exhibition games. I did get to see the third period of that Canton game because I was trying to, go back and forth between the Odd and the Utica University Nexus Center. And my phone was screwed up because it normally doesn't see that many steps. So I think my phone thought it was stolen because it was, but yeah, they were up 2-1 going into that third period. Shorthanded goal got them late. It was, just one of those things, but you're right. But let's talk about that Utica University kickoff tournament because I think it's a great idea for starters. The inaugural Utica University kickoff tournament, and you're right, they stacked the deck for this tournament. So Suffolk, who you just mentioned, actually received votes in the USCHO preseason poll. Adrian is ranked 6th. Elmira is 12th. So no matter which way you cut it, the Pioneers are going to get tested early. There's just no doubt about it. The first 2 games are on Friday. I believe it's 4 o'clock and 7 o'clock. Or no, I'm sorry, 1 and 4 o'clock. The Pioneers are playing at 4. And then Saturday is just going to be wild because, I mean, if you thought Friday night was insane, wait till Saturday rolls around when you have games at 1 o'clock and 4 o'clock at the Nexus. The men are playing at 2 over at the Odd. And then after that, the Comets are playing at 7 o'clock. So it's
by the way, on Friday, it's 4 and 7.
Is it? Okay. I wrote it down wrong. Yeah,
then what, because since I'm going on Friday, I heard that and I'm like, hold on, I need to make sure that's because I can't make 1 p.m. I can do 4. But.
I had it backwards, and it's a good thing because you're covering the game for us. So
yes,
here I am giving you the wrong times.
It's another part of the reason I just had to. I'm like, okay, well, let me reassess there.
Yeah, well, but yeah, I mean, I think it's a great idea to have that tournament early like that, and to have the teams in there because you know what, getting those tests early, we just talked about it earlier. You find out what your team has right off the hop.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's definitely tiers to it. I mean, the women do this a lot better than the men in terms of tournaments, and a lot of it's due to, conferences and just scheduling. I get it, but the women do it a lot better in the sense that you get those teams up in, and also it just helps that these teams are good that are condensed, geographically. But you get like the Plattsburgh tournament, the Middlebury tournament, Norwich tournament. It's always Plattsburgh, Middlebury. You'll get like a Wisconsin River Falls this year, getting an Eau Claire. Or an Adrian up there like we saw last year. And then you'll throw in maybe another NESCAC or like an Elmira like we saw last year. So you're always getting, like last year in one of the women's tournaments, I think it was like 1, 2, 4, and I don't know, like 10 or something. So it's one of those where they definitely do a better job, and like it's good that Utica's doing it. And I think it's also good because I think there is levels to it. Like Utica, they're not an NCAA tournament team every year. They're not that type of team like a Middlebury or a River Falls seems to be. So, or like even a Plattsburgh. I forgot to mention. Yeah, hard to forget them. But you've got those teams all kind of grouped at the top in the top 5. They all have their tournament, and I think this is very good because you have a battle of kind of like the teens, and then in the 5 to 10, like you get that Adrian, you get Elmira who's in and out, Utica who's now finding themselves a lot in that 10 to 15 range, and then I just think it's a good, and even Suffolk now they're also finding themselves in that kind of 15 range. So I think it's a very good tiered tournament in the sense that like the top teams, like the elite, always having their tournaments. Now Utica's having one that's very much of that, pretty much just a group of teams looking to make that leap.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, and again, that's going to help them in the rankings too, especially if they have a strong showing in this tournament. It's going to be like, oh, okay, well, they're not beating up on teams that they should be beating anyway. Now they're beating higher level competition, which is what I really think they need the most to really prove themselves to the voters. And looking ahead at some of the other games that they got, December 9th, they're at number 5, Hamilton College, which, last season's game was just awesome. It ended up being a 2-2 tie. Hamilton College threw everything but the kitchen sink at them, and the Pioneers came back and to get the tie in the third period. But that's another good test early too. So, Hamilton College just named a new coach. Kate Holtz was named yesterday. So it's going to be really interesting to see how they look. But the big one for the Pioneers is getting by Nazareth. Nazareth is ranked 11th in the country coming in, and they've beaten the Pioneers they beat them for the title last year. Heartbreaker in the final of the UCHC tournament, 3-2 in double overtime. But for the Pioneers to get into the NCAA tournament, they're probably going to need to get that UCHC automatic bid, even though they might get an at-large bid if they do really good against the other teams. But Nazareth is the one. And what do we know about Nazareth? Have they had some key losses, key gains, anything?
Nazareth, they have a very, very young team. I believe I'm going to misquote myself, but it's something like 11 freshmen, and then I think like 7 sophomores. And then they only have 5 juniors and seniors combined or something like that. So it's a very, very young team, and it's kind of fun to see what they'll be able to do. I mean, I think it's one of those, you don't want to just, the players are different in the uniform, but the uniform's still the uniform. I mean, I think It's just Utica needs to get over that kind of, you need to beat them, whoever's on the ice.
Right.
You need to get it done. I think last year, and I said this, various times in the USCHO articles I was writing, I thought that those two were the best series of hockey of anybody. And,
sure.
If you just look at the stats of all 3 games, I mean, all of them, it was overtime, one double overtime. I mean, you can't really get any better. So I thought those two, I mean, obviously Nazareth last year, they were a lot older than they are now, but it's one of those about getting over the hump and just getting that mental of beating that team, even though they're different players, just beating that team behind the jersey. And it's Nazareth's conference at the moment, and Utica's, it's their opportunity to take it. But, it just all depends. On paper, Utica should probably get them just because of, disparities of just veteran players. Sure. But, who knows? It's, again, you just got to get over the hump, and sometimes it just works in weird ways.
Yeah, absolutely. It's definitely the team that they've got to get by. Those games, by the way, looking at it right now, they're at home for Utica, and those are on January 27th and the 26th. So I had that a little bit backwards, but that's okay. And of course, those two being the best teams in the conference, naturally, Nazareth is number 1. They got 4 first place votes in the UCHC preseason poll. And I'm sorry, they got 7, and Utica is number 2 with 4 first place votes. And like the men, they did a players to watch. And for the Pioneers, goaltender Angela Hawthorne and forwards Erica Sloan and Carolyn Whitney are the players to watch. Jordy, who else do you think could be on that list? And tell us a little bit about those 3, if you would.
So Hawthorne has had, I mean, that's a name you hear a lot with her being in goal and doing what she did last year. Obviously, you still have those couple teams that are a thorn in the side, but between her and Sloan and the rest of such a well-developed and older team, there shouldn't be much worry. I mean, obviously, Nazareth will always be a thorn in the side. It's literally a reverse of the men's team, and it will always be a reverse of the men's team at the moment but it's still a battle. And right now, I don't have a specific player to watch, but it's just the whole team in general because it's so – there's that experience there that the men's team had last year. And it's like you don't pick out one guy, you pick out the whole team.
Right. And this is – and you know what? The Pioneers are very much a team that's going to roll 4 lines. They don't have to really lean on any one particular line. So, I mean, that's always an advantage for them. And again, like I said, with that solid core minus Santula returning – it does, guys. It feels like this is the year. If they're going to do it, this is it right here. So not to put any pressure on them or anything, but I'm just saying that it looks like the stars are lining up correctly. Let's just put it that way. Any closing thoughts on the Utica Pioneers women's hockey team?
I will say, though, when you mentioned the Hamilton head coach being filled, I'm glad that she got it because I said that's the likely case in my article, so that checks out.
Yes,
so,
you did.
There you go. Yeah. So no, glad to see that. But I think that'll be an interesting game. I mean, I'm glad. I think I'm glad for Utica's sake if they're getting the games at home because I think that'll for Nazareth because I just think that'll especially help them in terms of getting over that mental hurdle versus if it's in Naz, you don't really know.
Sure.
For a multitude of reasons, but it should be a fun time. And no, I mean they have all the pieces. It just depends if they put it together.
Yeah, absolutely. It's going to be a fun season. So before we go, I want to give you guys the opportunity to let the listeners know just what it is that you're up to. Now, Jordy, I know that you got other podcasts and YouTube channels and all that going on. So tell us a little bit about it.
So obviously, I mean, right now I'm kind of paused on the football stuff right now because it's the swing of hockey season and midterms just ended. But once that's good, everything should start flowing. I have a project that I just finished this morning and more on the way. But, I mean, that project should be out by tomorrow night because the game is at 7. I think I'm going to schedule it for like 6:30. But I have to do final checks and everything else. But once that's good to go, it will be out.
Awesome. Yeah, make sure you get your homework done in between that too. So don't forget about that.
Yep.
Chris, I know you've got a million things going on, of course, with D3 Hockey News, the USCHO. You got your podcast and the Full 60. Tell us a little bit about when all that's coming back.
Yeah, the Full 60. We're just trying to get some schedules figured out, and just because that's friend who films, he works full time and everything. So we're just trying to get that all kind of sorted. We've got some places in mind. We're looking at, I'm not sure if he'll be able to do it or if we'll be able to, the Stonehill game for Utica. I'm not sure. We'll figure that out, but we'll get to Utica. We're looking to at least this season for that. And it's honestly, those are just kind of tough we're going to try to get them pre-planned out. It's just with so many factors falling in, it's kind of just, not last minute, but it's not as planned out as far as you'd think. So we're looking at that. And then, yeah, I mean, just USCHO and the D3 stuff. I mean, we're just expanding a little bit and it's a lot, we got that, we got schools, some internships and, we're moving along, but yeah, there isn't much free time. Like I said in a tweet, I wouldn't change it though. I mean, I wouldn't change having the busy season by any means, but yeah, it's a lot.
Yeah, absolutely. But it is the most wonderful time of the year. I've said this 1,000 times and I'll say it again. Where are we going to find you on the socials?
D and then 3 I's and then Hockey News. It's as I've said many, many times, it's a very creative name, D3 Hockey News. Yeah. Which it kind of gets straight to the point. But yeah, it's pretty much that's the name of every platform: Twitter, Instagram, Spotify, YouTube, and the Spotify is because I had to change it the other day. So yeah, it's all the same, and it's all the links are in the bios, and it's pretty much where we're at. We're seeing where it goes, and I'll be with the CNY Hockey Report this Friday. So
That's
Look forward to
awesome. We're so glad to have you aboard too. And speaking of the CNY Hockey Report, you can find it, cnyhockeyreport.com. You can find us all over the socials, and you're really going to want to pay attention to our socials because starting tonight, we have a contest. We have 2 Utica Pioneers men's season tickets to give away. So pay attention to the socials to find out how you can get in on that. Well, gentlemen, thank you very much. I appreciate it. This is going to be a fun season, and I'm so glad that you guys could be a part of our preview show. So I hope you enjoyed it. Anyways, I'm Scott Kimball for Dave the Save Warner, Jordan Brockway, and Chris Sugar. Thanks for listening, and we will see you next week on the Central New York Hockey Report.